Sometimes when life's problems and worries accumulate, it is very good to plan to start over to build a better life. For some people, getting a fresh start in life is so important that they will do almost anything to achieve it, including faking their death. While it may seem unnatural to do so, people who fake their deaths to avoid their own problems instead. Those who face it, whether it is serious criminal charges, strained relationships, or mounting bills, are present in reality. These fake deaths are full of crazy, surprising and sometimes funny ideas. But dear reader, before you start planning your escape, take a closer look at those who fake their deaths. While some of them are more creative than others, they all get caught in the end.
1. William Groth. Lawyer William Groth rose to fame not only after faking his death but also claiming that he was the killer, that is, that he was the criminal and the victim at the same time. He called the police, pretended to be a murderer, claimed to have killed someone and now felt guilty. He led them to the scene of the crime. Indeed, a car was found in a Nashville park, and the alleged dead man's belongings were left along the riverbank as a way to further the story. However, the police noted that some things and circumstantial evidence were not true. All the items seemed to have been prepared to lead the police to believe that a crime had actually occurred and that the dead man was William Groth, but the trick and plan did not work. Later, it was discovered that William had a life insurance policy worth $1 million, meaning that he wanted to fake his death in order to benefit from the policy, perhaps through his wife, so he was arrested and sentenced to probation for 5 years. While it cost the authorities many resources to search for him, the funny thing is that it turns out that faking his death is not a crime, but he deserved to be punished.
2. Marcus Schrenker. Marcus Schrenker was a respected CFO in Indianapolis and seemed to be living the dream. He had a beautiful house worth $4 million, a wife and 3 children, and he owned a private plane. But this was all a facade. Behind the scenes, Schrenker's life was nothing but a big, hot mess. He was deeply in debt, having successfully cheated on his wife, and was accused of committing stock market fraud. When the state moved to revoke his securities license, in 2009, Schrenker hatched a plan to leave his problems behind him. He boarded his plane and flew over the Alabama countryside, jumping with a parachute, leaving the plane to fall and crash while he landed safely. But he made it seem as if he had disappeared into the wreckage somehow. He later hid in wilderness camps across Alabama and Florida while police searched for him. Investigators found a travel guide in the wreckage with the pages for the states of Florida and Alabama torn out, so they had a good idea where he might be hiding. When they found him, he was suffering from self-inflicted injuries. Apparently, the fake death turned into a real suicide attempt. 3. Timothy Dexter, the American Uyghur. Although you may not have heard of Timothy Dexter yourself, you certainly would have done so if you were part of Massachusetts society in the early 19th century. Although he left school at the age of 8 and was uneducated, and he was eccentric, he was financially fortunate to a degree that will amaze you to the point where you need an entire article to explain it because it is closer to the tales of Uyghur than to the lived reality. He made his fortune by buying American government bonds emerging after independence, which were not worth anything at the time and no one bought them, but after the United States became stable as a country, the bonds rose and their prices became very high, so Dexter achieved a major revolution and bought 2 ships. However, money could not buy culture. High society never accepted him and denied his existence. People would make fun of him and consider him an idiot. For example, they would say, export a shipment of iron bed warmers, they look like a ladle and have no commercial value, and he would actually buy a huge quantity and send it on his ship. The strange thing is that while the captain was stopping in one of the cities, the people there thought that these iron heaters were cooking ladles, so they bought them all and made a huge profit. Once they told him, in order to laugh at him and make him lose, export coal to England, and it is known that England was the largest exporter of coal in the world at that time, and in fact they sent a ship loaded with coal to England. By coincidence, there was actually a coal crisis in that season, so his coal was bought in full, at a profit. Big. Of course, there are many such stories about Dexter, and it would take a long time to explain them. In the end, the man found himself as one of the richest men in Boston, and built for himself an eccentric palace, in his appearance, filled with statues of the greats of history, and he was among them, of course. One of the strangest things about Dexter's story is that he faked his death, but years before he faked his death, he faked his wife's death, so he would tell everyone that his wife had died, then suddenly the wife would come out in front of them, from the door of the house, and they would say to him in astonishment, "But isn't this your wife?" He replied to them, saying, "No. This is the ghost of my wife. She comes to clean the house from time to time." Years later, Dexter decided that the time had come to see how everyone really felt about him, and whether they would be sad about his departure from this world. So he faked his death and organized a large funeral in his honor and sat and watched people's reactions from a hidden place. He saw that the people who were supposed to be the closest people to him were not as sad as he expected. What upset him most was that his wife did not show any sadness for him, so he went out angry and beat his wife after the funeral, because she did not cry for him. As we said, the man was comically eccentric. He sought to attract the spotlight to himself by every means possible. Perhaps the funniest part of Dexter's story is that he wrote a book and published it before his death. The book was a memoir and strange opinions, in which he mainly complained about politicians and clergy, and his wife. In addition to strange things, to the point that he claimed in part of his book that he was the Lord, and the entire book was written in one paragraph without bullet points, and was full of spelling and rhetorical errors, but the man was inexplicably and illogically lucky. This ridiculous book gained such wide fame among people that it was printed 8 times. According to some analysts, Dexter was not crazy, but he was just like you her, a smart man and a merchant who knew where the shoulder was eaten from, but he was pretending to be naive in front of people to make his way and communicate his ideas, so he was the sane person and they were the crazy ones. 4. John Stonehouse. Before John Stonehouse tried to fake his death, he was known as the Labour Party's Secretary of the British Parliament. He felt trapped in an unhappy marriage and wanted to run away with his lover and secretary, Sheila Buckley. In 1974, he went to a beach in Miami and disappeared. He supposedly drowned, and basically got away with faking his death. He moved to Australia with Buckley to set up a new life, using a fake name and setting up a bank account. Things got worse when another British man disappeared at the same time. In the same year that Stonehouse faked his death, Richard John Bingham, known as Lord Lucan, also disappeared. His wife was attacked and their nanny killed, and he was nowhere to be found. His wife said Bingham attacked her, and a manhunt was launched. Back in Australia, a teller at Stonehouse's bank begins to suspect John Stonehouse and suspects that he may be the fugitive Lord Lucan. The police arrested him thinking it was Lucan, but soon found it was Stonehouse. He was charged with fraud, theft, conspiracy to defraud and causing a false police investigation. 5. Alfred Ross. In 1930 AD, Alfred Ross found himself in endless problems due to the expenses of supporting his illegitimate children from several women. Ross decided to fake his death in a satanic way. He killed a traveling man he met while driving on the road and offered to give him a ride. He killed him, put his body in his car, and set a fire. In which. But while he was escaping, 2 witnesses saw him. After his arrest, he tried to claim that the car caught fire because the passenger was smoking a bad type of cigar. near the petrol cans. The jury did not believe him, and he was hanged in 1931. The murdered traveler was never officially identified, but some believe the man was James Brick. Brick, who lived near where Ross set his car on fire, was known to be traveling in the area at the time. His family said he disappeared shortly before the accident, and they are trying to do a DNA test to prove if it was definitely him. 6. Awry Square. Awry Squire wanted to start a new life in 2008, and his mind came up with a hellish plan. He hatched a scheme to kill a friend of his named Justin Newman and assume his identity, making it appear as if he, Squire, was the one who actually died. So he swapped clothes and wallets with Newman, and bought a brown wig and blue lenses to look like him. He then lured him to his house, killed him, set his body on fire in the garage and then called the police. The authorities, of course, believed that the burned body they found was that of the Squire, and so did his family. After the trick was fooled, Squire fled to Missouri, assuming the identity of his victim. But Newman's mother reported him missing, and police conducted tests on the body's burned teeth. Has not been.
7 death-faking suspect held. Salem Michael Rosen, a convicted serial forger, who allegedly faked his own death to avoid prosecution for pending criminal matters, appeared very much alive yesterday in Salem District Court, sitting handcuffed in the dock. Rosen hung his head in the same courtroom where prosecutors said he nearly got away with his ruse. On August 10th, prosecutors said Rosen presented a fake death certificate to the court clerk's office, which resulted in charges against him being dismissed. I've never heard of anyone who forged their death certificate to get out of charges, allegedly, Judge Richard Morey said during Rosen's arraignment on 2 counts of forgery and a single count of uttering. Rosen, who wore a striped polo shirt and a weary look, sat with his head slumped during much of the proceedings and did not speak. Morey entered a plea of not guilty on his behalf. Rosen, 42, formerly of 181 North St., was arrested in Wenham on Tuesday on a warrant. He had been staying at a relative's home when he revealed his location to Salem detectives, who went there to arrest him, despite defense attorney Sierra Rosen's no relation assertion that her client did not pose a danger. Morey ordered the defendant held on $10,000 cash bail or a $100,000 surety bond, on the recommendation of Essex County Assistant District Attorney Colleen Cashman. We do believe this defendant poses a danger to the community, Cashman said. Michael Rosen was also arraigned on 2 counts of larceny of a credit card and 2 counts of larceny over $250, with bail set at $2,500 on those charges. A pretrial hearing was set for September 13th. Each felony count carries up to 10 years in state prison or up to 21 years in jail, said Salem Police LT Comrade Presnevsky, the department's police prosecutor. The 2 counts of forgery relate to the death certificate, one relating to the alleged forged signature of Salem City Clerk Cheryl LaPointe and the other 2, the counterfeit certificate. Cashman said the fake certificate was rife with errors. It misspelled Saugus as Saugus, Temple Israel Cemetery in Peabody as Temple Israel Cemetery, and gave the cause of death as acute cardiorespiratory arrest instead of acute cardiac respiratory arrest. Despite those errors and the lack of a raised seal, Michael Rosen nearly succeeded in passing it off as a valid death certificate, police said. It was Morey who, on August 11th, dismissed a case of driving with a suspended license against the defendant stemming from a June 29th traffic accident on North Street in Salem. He did so based on the death certificate. During the proceedings yesterday, Morey and attorney Rosen had an exchange, as the public defender asked for a modest cash bail. The attorney at first asked for more time to review the larceny case after Morey imposed a high bail on the forgery case. This new case, which included 2 counts of larceny of a credit card, was resurrected when Michael Rosen was found to be alive, Cashman said this case, which was unrelated to the motor vehicle accident, had to do with an allegation by an ex-girlfriend that Rosen stole 2 credit cards from her and rang up hundreds in charges. Cashman asked for $2,500 cash bail on this case. Attorney Rosen said the credit card larceny case may be more complex than first thought, because at the time, her client was living with the victim, and they shared expenses. The alleged victim does not want to go forward with the case, she said. The defense attorney said prosecutors also failed to prove the defendant was dangerous and asked that bail in a prior case not be revoked. Maury said he has been practicing law for 30 years and had never heard of anyone faking death to get out of charges. The judge said if the defendant could do that, there was no telling what he might be capable of. It is pretty outrageous conduct alleged, Morris said, adding that Rosen's 8-page record was one of fraud and deceit and stealing from people, and more is alleged. Handing in the certificate, Cashman said the forgery case stems from a June 29 accident on North Street in which Michael Rosen was charged with operating, or his license had been suspended. On August 10, Rosen pretended to be his brother and handed a death certificate to a Salem District Court clerk, Cashman said. After Maury dismissed the case, Salem District Court probation officer Sean Whalen, who supervises Rosen, had his doubts. Whalen had seen Rosen the week before, and he appeared to be in good health. From Whalen's tip, Prasnevsky showed the death certificate to a city clerk, who declared it counterfeit. Salem detective James Page said there was no investigation made into Michael Rosen's death. Police checked with Temple Shirot Hayim in Swampscott, which manages Temple Israel Cemetery in Peabody, and found there was no record of Rosen's burial there. Whalen showed the court clerk a photo of Rosen, and she confirmed the picture looked like the Mo.